we explore a land filled with wonder, mystery, and beauty. From temples to pharaohs and queens and tombs filled with gold. This is the burial chamber of the tomb of Seti I. Come with me as we trace through the history spanning over 7,000 years of ancient Egypt.
La puissance de ton Dieu est assez grande.
Anubis has resurrected Osiris.
With special access to tombs, monuments, and artifacts that many people have never seen or heard of before. This is a very special tomb, so come look.
What has happened here is the battle. And I have a little offering for Queen Nefertari.
Nefertari of Egypt speaks thus.
From the monuments of Ramses II. Ramses on his chariot with his horse shooting his bow and arrow, to the golden treasures of Tutankhamun. Incredible to be seeing this so up close. And the lesser known stories of this country.
Nefertiti and Akhenaten.
The real Cleopatra.
I believe that I am inside this tomb.
Egypt came to an end. Come discover the history of Egypt through the ages.
I'm about to show you the best view of the pyramids. There's an old saying that if you drink water from the Nile, you'll be back here. And I'm back here now. We're having breakfast at our hotel, and where else in the world do you get a view like this? From the balcony here, we can see the entire Giza Plateau. Just excuse the chickens. Okay, you can see the entire Giza Plateau. You can see the pyramid for Khufu, his queens, the Khufu ship. Here's the Sphinx, the Valley Temple, the tombs of the pyramid builders. Then behind me here, we've got Khafra's pyramid, and then the pyramid for Menkaure and his queen's pyramid. This is like so interesting to me. You can see like everyone's livestock is down here. They've got ducks, they've got goats, everything. This is the Amenhotep Museum, which is named after the architect of the step pyramid for Pharaoh Zoser.
The world's first ever pyramid and the world's first ever stone structure at Saqqara.
As you walk in here, it's so amazing, greeted by, it's not much to look at. It's a little statue of Zoser, and if you look here, he's not here, but all we have is his feet. And at the bottom here, you can see the remnants of his name, Imhotep. Imhotep was a physician.
of the Hatshepsut court.
Hatshepsut court.
And it's very interesting to check, if from here,
Yes.
to check the ruins stated are King Luxor.
So this is King Luxor.
Yeah, and the most interesting point, not the perfection we are seeing of these statues, actually
Symbolic.
the symbolic, Here you are seeing a certain, royal pose.
Yes.
Yeah, the two hands holding like a scepter in front of him over here. And the same.
Ptah, it's both hands like that, like Ptah.
Ptah. So you can imagine that maybe it was a statue of Ptah or Zeus
as Ptah.
Yes, exactly. So it worked for both.
Ptah, the god of the shadows and of medicine and
for craftsmen.
Yes.
And he was the main local god of Menf. The ancient Egyptians assigned a god for each province of Egypt. So the main god
of this area is Ptah.
Was Ptah. They are like dummy buildings.
There's nothing inside. It's just for show.
Just for show.
We're not exactly sure where Egypt came from. I mean, they didn't just spring out the ground, but we can trace it as far back as almost 7,000 years ago, where we have a tribe in the Libyan desert and along the Mediterranean. And as the weather started to change and the climate started to change, what we have now as desert started to dry up where they were living, and they moved forward and forward and forward until they reached the Nile, where they settled. From the two Nakhada tribes, which settled in the north and the south of Egypt, we had two major cities that were formed, known firstly as Nekhen in the south and Inu in the north, Heracleopolis and Heliopolis. And in Heracleopolis, we have which is known as the first ever pharaoh, Pharaoh Nama, and Nama actually unified Egypt. He got his soldiers together and they went to the north and they had a battle, and this was recorded on the Nama palette, and he's the first pharaoh to rule Egypt as a unified Egypt. There's just something everywhere here at Saqqara. I mean, you walk down here and this is so beautiful. It's an entrance to a tomb, and you can see the door, all the hieroglyphics, the husband and his wife. You can still see the color on here. You can see it was red. Look, you can see the eyes with the eye makeup. The Egyptians built false doors, which were designed to look like doors, but for actually your spirit to pass between the afterlife and this life, because they believed your spirit could come in and out. And Unas's wife had a very nice false door, and actually with the false doors, a lot of the time women would write down little letters, and they would, if they were angry with their husbands or if they wanted help with something, they'd write on the letter and they'd leave it at the false door, believing that the spirit would come and read the letter.
In early dynasties, they would include in the tomb many figurines of deities, but apart from that, also figurines of workers who would do that specific job for you in the afterlife, including objects that you would use in your everyday life, such as your headrest. In higher ranking,
this is King Unas's causeway, and it leads to his pyramid, which is the first pyramid with text inside, and all of the mastabas for his children. In the 5th dynasty, when Pharaoh Unas was ruling Egypt, there was a famine, and this was recorded in his causeway. And actually, the famine didn't last too long, because Unas came along and he built canals, and he started with irrigation and building up farming systems. And this is actually recorded inside the son of Unas in his mastaba for Unas Ankh. And inside Unas's daughter's tomb, we actually have images showing how prosperous Egypt was. We have vast amounts of cattle, fishing in the Nile, and Unas really turned Egypt around at that stage and brought the country to what would continue as a very prosperous country.
Like a special time of the year. So she's enjoying her time in such special.
And it's showing that it's so prosperous. I mean, they're capturing all of these fish and crocodiles, and look at all of these cows. This is beyond beautiful. The green, because that's very special.
Exactly, because we're not used to see the radish color, the yellow color. The green color, it's unique to find that color.
And look at this jackal. I mean, that is a clear sign of Anubis. And he's climbing on the lotus and capturing the geese. And look at all of these hunters here on the boats.
The more you focus, the more details you find like a butterfly.
What did the butterfly represent? Is that the time of the year?
It's, yes, spring.
Yes.
And
Which today is still...
Yeah.
In the Nile, we can see here the hippos and the crocodiles with the boat above. And inside the boat is Princess Idut in full size with her lady-in-waiting by her knee, showing Idut's status in Egypt. This is a very special tomb, so
it's such full color.
Yes.
And all these statues of
Represented him, represented him,
Different
in different
stages.
stages of his life.
And
It sounds...
he's the butcher to the pharaoh.
Yes, and he's the head of the butchers, not just a butcher.
Irukata was the head butcher in the 6th dynasty, and actually what's very interesting, he was buried, as the Egyptians did this quite a lot, they buried them with things that they believed they need in the afterlife, and as Irukata was the butcher, he was buried with hordes of raw meat. And the strange thing is, when you go into his tomb, even to today, the raw meat smell is still there, and it's crazy to think that something like 4,000 years ago, we have the smell of raw meat and we can still smell Pharaoh Pepi is actually quite an interesting character in the 6th dynasty, and he had a huge dislike for flies, actually almost a phobia, and he got one of his courtiers and he had this man covered in honey every day to attract the flies, to keep the flies away from Pepi. And Pepi actually ruled for a very long time, so I feel quite sorry for whoever had to be covered in honey for almost like something 60 years or something like that. And his mummy is actually on display in the Amenhotep Museum at Saqqara.
Many of the farming techniques used today are the same as used by the ancient Egyptians, and going around Saqqara you get an idea of how historical this place actually is.
King Snefru actually built himself 3 pyramids because after Zoser and everything, they were trying to perfect the pyramid style from going away from a step pyramid to a smooth pyramid. However, he was not very successful. If we see here in these photos, this is one that he built. They actually built it almost like a step pyramid, and they realized that it was crumbling in. So this one of Snefru, he abandoned. Then Snefru built this one, which is called the bent pyramid, and it has these bent sides because they were building it at too much of a steep angle and all the rocks were falling off, and they had to change the angle of the building. Actually, Snefru, when he saw the bent pyramid, he was not happy again, and he abandoned this pyramid at Dashur. After that one, they perfected it, and they built this pyramid, which is known as the Red Pyramid. Snefru had a son, and his son succeeded him on the throne, and he is known as Pharaoh Khufu, and he's the builder of the Great Pyramid, the biggest pyramid that was ever built. And it's very ironic because we don't know a lot about Khufu because there's not much written about him, but we have a very interesting statue which is only a few centimeters tall of Khufu, made out of ivory, and this was actually found at the base of the pyramid inside his mother's tomb. And we actually know more about Khufu's mother than we actually know about Khufu, the builder of the biggest monument in Egypt. This is an amazing view of the pyramids. You can see all three of these huge ancient monuments, and to be here, you know what, you cannot describe what it feels like. Pyramids were actually used as tombs for the pharaoh, and also for, the pharaoh's wives, the queens. It is a big myth that the pyramids were built by slaves. We have proof, we have tombs for the slaves. Well, they weren't slaves, they were workers, because if they were slaves, they were not given a tomb. They were looked after, they were paid, they got paid in food and beer and wine, and they had houses given to them where they could live with their families. So this whole thing that, the pharaohs were slave drivers and forced everyone to work, that's not true. During a certain part of the year, men would be called aside and they would go and work on the pharaoh's project, whether that was to build a temple or a pyramid. And they were workers, they got paid and they enjoyed what they did. In the distance from the Great Pyramid, you can see a new structure being built, which is known as the Grand Egyptian Museum. It is set to open very soon and will surely be Egypt's greatest museum ever. At the Sphinx Valley Temple, which is just in front of the paws of the Sphinx, the Great Sphinx, we had these statues, which are beautiful, of Pharaoh Khafra, and they are made out of granite. And at the back of Khafra's head, we have Horus holding Khafra's head, supporting him. And these statues are so amazing to look at. And just to think that there were 12 of these statues originally inside the Valley Temple. However, in this turbulent 4th Dynasty family, before Khafra and his successor Menkaure, came another son of Khufu, known as Djedefre. Djedefre felt a little pushed out by the family, and he wanted to try and build a bigger pyramid than his father Khufu, and he moved his pyramid just a little to the side above on a hill, because he believed if he was on a hill, his pyramid would actually be taller. His pyramid was not actually even near the size of Khufu's pyramid. One theory is that Djedefre is the one whose face is on the Sphinx. Personally, I like to believe that the face on the Sphinx is of Khafra, because it resembles him the most, and it's almost exactly in line with Khafra's pyramid. But we do know that Djedefre tried to feel closer to his father, and he actually buried 2 ships at the base of Khufu's pyramid, which we still have intact. And Djedefre was almost like the outcast, but he tried to really connect back with his family. The Sphinx is so beautiful at sunset. You can literally see almost all the other colors that it had because it was originally painted. The Sphinx's nose was not broken by Napoleon. In fact, it was broken by an Arabian army general long before Napoleon visited Egypt. The back of the Sphinx, you can see everywhere where the Romans came in, and they tried to repair the Sphinx because this is carved out of the solid rock here. So it's had a lot of damage, and you've got to try and repair these things, obviously, to preserve it.
And you can see all of the layers here, and it goes back up until we get to the back of the head where we see the pharaoh wearing the Nemes headdress. The back has fallen off, but you can still see the lock on the back of the Sphinx's neck where it was held on, where it was holding on to the back of the headdress. And all the details are still here of the pleats in the headdress. With the golden sunset right now, it's just incredible to look at. No one is quite sure of the function of the Sphinx. However, Sphinxes were seen as the protector of sacred places, and as this is a sacred burial place, it would make sense to have a Sphinx there. Sphinxes are also used as the symbol for Akhet, which is horizon, as in the pharaoh rising above as the sun. Here we have the death mask for Pharaoh Hor-Awibra. It was found in his tomb at Dashur, and this is the death mask of the pharaoh with the Ka statue. We're going to show you the Ka statue a little bit later.
Elephantine Temple is on an island in the middle of the Nile, and at the moment it is closed to the public and it is being restored, and you can see where the original stones are and where they filled them in, and as you go along they've very kindly extended the old drawings with new drawings to show you what it used to look like. So this temple should be opened very soon to show to everyone, but it's actually quite amazing how they are able to restore it for people to view. Senusert III, or Sesostris III, was the pharaoh in the 12th dynasty, and he's very famous for his statues. He looks very displeased, but he was actually an amazing pharaoh, and he led wars into Nubia to go and conquer this African country below Egypt. This chapel is built by Sesostris III. This is the feet of Sesostris III. The top of this is actually inside the British Museum now. He went into Nubia and he wanted to get the gold. And because of Sesostris's efforts with the Nubians, they actually became allies, and Nubia then became a very strong part of the Egyptian culture. We're going to go into the basement to have a look underneath the temple. It's quite impressive, so let's go. There's a lot of bats, so let's make it fast.
This tomb dates back to the 4th dynasty, and it is actually extremely rare to find a tomb, yet alone a tomb for a priest, underneath a temple.
The son of Sesostris III was Amenhotep III. Amenhotep actually built this pyramid originally. It doesn't even look like a pyramid anymore. Actually, it just looks like a mud mountain, because this was built out of mud brick. And yeah, it doesn't look that great. So he abandoned this one and moved all the way to Hawara near Fayum and built this pyramid also out of mud brick and limestone. And this is actually where Amenhotep decided to use as his tomb. He built canals and also expanded Egypt's agricultural status, and even explored the land of Punt, which is now known as Ethiopia.
When you dismantle the name Amenhotep, as I explained before, their names related with their gods.
Yes.
Thutmosis, Ra, Tutankhamun.
After Amenhotep IV came a female pharaoh, And this woman was known as Sobek Neferu, which meant the beautiful one of Sobek, the crocodile god. And actually Sobek Neferu was the sister of Amenhotep IV, as Amenhotep IV did not actually have any children. But Egypt at this stage was still not very accepting of a first female pharaoh, and unfortunately Sobek Neferu only ruled for 3 years, and after she died she was buried in her father's pyramid for Amenhotep III, and actually a few of the other family members were buried in this same pyramid. This is Sobek Neferu, the first ever recorded female pharaoh, but unfortunately all of her statues have been defaced. As we know, defacing a statue took your name out of history and almost refused you the pass to get into the afterlife. They were not happy that a woman was pharaoh, same with Hatshepsut, and they tried to destroy her image out of history. This one even worse, not even the nose, the cobra, the symbol of the pharaohs, was taken away, and almost her entire face was taken away. But this woman really led the path for a series of female pharaohs which would come to follow in her footsteps years and years later. His eyes are blue, and he's got the Osiris beard, which means he's passed on to the afterlife. And he actually restored this pyramid of Amenemhat at Dashur, using only a section for himself because it was a very short reign. And this is actually what his tomb looked like. This is a drawing of how they found his tomb. They would have come through here. Here would have been his statue, the Ka statue, along with a few chairs and some funerary objects, moving along to his stone sarcophagus with his wooden sarcophagus on the inside. At the end here are his canopic jars in this shaft tomb inside a pyramid. And actually underneath the wooden sarcophagus we had his body with his death mask. This is the death mask for Horowibra, which they found. It's made out of wood, glass, and brass, actually. So these are just a few objects that they found in his tomb, like his veil, the necklaces. This would have been his pectoral necklace that he wore with Horus on either side, which tied at the back. Let us jump forward to the 18th dynasty. In 1500 BC, Egypt yet again was faced with another problem. The Pharaoh Thutmosis II had died, and his son Thutmosis III was far too young to rule Egypt. However, his stepmother Hatshepsut stepped in and basically took the role as pharaoh. Hatshepsut explored quite a lot during her time. She brought back plants and food and spices and perfumes from all over, including Ethiopia, Punt, and she sent her stepson, Thutmosis III, out to defend the country when he was older. So she ruled the country and he defended it.
Hatshepsut, she's one of 7 ladies had succeeded to rule Egypt, but she dressed as a king, as a man, as a pharaoh.
She was a very strong woman.
No doubt, no doubt. But where we are right now, we can easily say love is supreme because this unique construction had been made by love.
A man who was in love with her built it for her.
That's right.
It has been rumored that Hatshepsut had a male consort. Senenmut is speculated to be the father of Hatshepsut's daughter, Nefertari, but we don't have this actually confirmed. But there are quite a few statues of Senenmut with Nefertari on his lap, and this is very symbolic to actually show that he might be the father. However, Hatshepsut died and Thutmosis III took the throne as the rightful ruler of Egypt. He took away Hatshepsut's name. The big obelisk that Hatshepsut built, Hatshepsut being the first person to build the obelisks, he took her name off it, he took her name off temples and just wanted to try and take her out of history because he believed she was not the rightful pharaoh. He believed he was the rightful pharaoh and that she should have just been not so involved, but you know, he was too young, so she was actually doing a good thing.
This granite sphinx of the queen and pharaoh Hatshepsut is quite beautiful yet imposing at the same time. Here we see Hatshepsut wearing the Nemes headdress and the same regalia representing herself as a king. People were not pleased that a woman was pharaoh, and this was to be devastating for Hatshepsut's name in history.
And then from here you get an amazing view of the obelisk.
It's here that Hatshepsut built the biggest of all her obelisks.
They built a wall around Hatshepsut's obelisk
to hide
with just the tip sticking out. So only the priests could go in and read the story.
Yes.
But the public who would see it from far could not tell who it was.
But who could remove the name of a pharaoh? Perhaps someone who knew that they were the rightful heir.
Behind me now is what would have been the biggest obelisk in Egypt and in fact the entire world, carved from one solid piece of granite here in this quarry in Aswan. But unfortunately, when they were chipping away to dig out this enormous piece of rock, they cracked it. So it was left abandoned, but it's actually a good thing because this lets us see how they actually built these things. We are not even sure who this obelisk was intended for, as it was abandoned and no cartouches, no hieroglyphics were carved on it, but I can't even begin to explain to you how big this structure is. You actually have to be here to see the size of it.
God, Thutmosis III, the stepson of Queen Hatshepsut, ascended to the throne. Thuf was known as the god of writing, the god of the scribes.
Thutmosis III ruled for 54 years. He fought in 17 battles, the Battle of Megiddo being his biggest battle ever. He built around 50 temples and fortresses from Lower Syria down into Nubia. However, most of these are not standing anymore and destroyed because of the newly constructed Lake Nasser, which flooded these mud brick fortresses, and they've been lost to history forever.
Look at the nose, it's perfect. Super perfect, no mistakes at all.
You can even see all the lines.
All the line here in his beard, the size between this eye and this eye, it's perfect.
let's go inside. We're greeted by Hathor. Look at the beautiful colors still. This is also Hathor, but with a different crown on. She's got the red crown on. Along with Hathor, we see Khnum with Thutmosis III. This temple is closed to the public, so it is very special for us to be showing you here right now. And hopefully you will be able to come enjoy it very soon. And the colors are still here. They are busy showing you what used to be here. So it's actually very amazing to be in here. Thutmosis again, the stepson of Hatshepsut, Queen Hatshepsut. Wow, this is beautiful. Oh wow, I love this depiction of Hathor. I've never seen her wearing different crowns like that. This temple was built by Thutmosis III to leave his mark in Aswan. I mean, a lot of the monuments that we do see of him today, it's actually Hatshepsut's monuments that he took her name off.
Yeah, but we didn't find any out of things for Moses there, and I think the gift will like it.
Yeah. And also Ramses II, he restored all of Hatshepsut's names because he admired Hatshepsut for being a strong woman. After Thutmosis III, we had the son of Thutmosis III, Amenhotep II, followed by his son, Thutmosis IV. And Thutmosis IV has a very interesting story because the Great Sphinx was actually covered with sand at this time. He fell asleep at the paws of the Sphinx, which were covered by sand. He had a dream, and in this dream the Sphinx came alive and told him, Thutmosis, if you remove the sand from my body, I will make you into the next pharaoh. And he removed the sand from the body with his soldiers. Following that, he became the next pharaoh. And his son was to become the pharaoh Amenhotep III. We have written records suggesting that Tiye and Yuya, the mother and father of Queen Tiye, were of foreign descent, possibly even Mediterranean. Mutemuya, being the sister of Yuya, was actually present during the early reign of her son Amenhotep III, and she might have actually been behind connecting the young king at the time with Tiye to connect her family with royalty. These masks are for Tiye and Yuya, the mother and father of Tut's grandmother, Queen Tiye. Amenhotep III ruled Egypt for 39 years. He is the inventor of what we could say the beginning of a newspaper. It all started with a little scarab like this, a little stone scarab, and on the back of the scarab he would inscribe news bulletins. On this one, which is an exact replica, he is writing about how much he loves his wife-to-be, Queen Tiye, and telling us about that they are going to be getting married. Also, he explains at the back of this little scarab that he is building a lake at Akhim in honor of the new queen. Amenhotep III appears to have been crowned while still a child, between the ages of 6 and 12, so it is possible that he had a regent ruling on his behalf for a couple of years. And 2 years after he came onto the throne, he married Queen Tiye. Amenhotep III ruled Egypt in a more intellectual way than before. He didn't do any wars, he didn't do any battle. He instead decided to correspond directly with foreign allies, making friends with them, sending gold, as Egypt at this time is known as the Golden Age. They had so much gold. A foreign correspondent to Amenhotep III said, "Send me gold, because I believe in your country gold is as common as dust." Many foreign rulers actually preferred to converse directly with Queen Tiye rather than Amenhotep III because of his age at that time. Queen Tiye possibly being a couple of years older, maybe even 5 years older than Amenhotep III. Down in Nubia, Amenhotep III built this temple called Soleb, which he dedicated to his wife, Queen Tiye. And actually here we have an image of Queen Tiye stepping on the enemies, stepping on the Nubians, showing that Amenhotep and Queen Tiye are in charge of Egypt and Nubia at that time. Amenhotep III with Amun-Ra, Amun wearing the ram's horns and being greeted by Amenhotep III. The Serapeum has recently been restored and open to the public, and it's just incredible to see the size of the sarcophagus for the 24 apis bulls, each sarcophagus. Continued from the time of Amenhotep III all the way until the Ptolemaic time when the Greeks were here, and that's kind of where it ended, but each bull was buried here, and the ceremony that went on to bury each bull was extremely extravagant. They had dancers, they had singers, they had official mourners, exactly how they would have for the pharaoh. So quiet. It's like you can hear a pin drop. It's like you can feel how it must have been like when they closed that lid and everyone left. How
it's
quiet.
very important, it's not just quiet.
Its sarcophagus, I don't even want to walk underneath here because it's so huge. I feel like it's just going to snap off. Look at the size of just the lid. This is incredible. And these were bought from Aswan.
Yes.
How did they move these?
Flood, it's all about the flood.
The flood. This image, taken from the tomb of Amenhotep III, shows you just how badly it has been damaged. You see the faces have been cut out here. They haven't fallen out over the years. They've been cut out and transported to the Louvre Museum in Paris. This here is Amenhotep III and his royal wife, his great wife, Queen Tiye. Look how beautiful she looks. Queen Tiye being almost a co-regent with Amenhotep. She was that powerful. She was on the same level. So this is a very rare image of Queen Tiye from the tomb of Amenhotep. However, the most famous image of Queen Tiye is this bust. This is a replica of the bust of Queen Tiye, which I was given from my friend Muhammad. His grandfather actually crafted this out of wood about 100 years ago. So she's very special to me. But this is the image of Queen Tiye that we all know today. But you can see Queen Tiye and Amenhotep and her bust. Yeah, a very powerful woman. She looks a bit upset, but actually, if you know what this woman had to go through, you'd probably look the same way. Excuse how disheveled I look, I'm getting a bit hot right now. But on our way past, I thought I would stop and tell you about these two humongous statues. This is for Amenhotep III, the father of Akhenaten. Let's go take a look closer.
The Greeks used to refer to these statues as the Colossi of Memnon.
Next to King Amenhotep III, at the entrance to his mortuary temple, we have his queen, Queen Tiye. And Queen Tiye was known as one of the strongest queens from ancient Egypt. She's shown as very angry sometimes, but she was very powerful. She made a lot of decisions for the country, and she really did a lot of good. And when Akhenaten changed the religion, she only went to Amarna to visit him once, and she remained living here in Thebes, modern-day Luxor. In KV 35, 3 mummies turned out to be from the Amarna period. And actually, after a couple of tests and identification, the mummy of Queen Tiye. Now, to me, Queen Tiye looks like she would have been incredibly beautiful, with a long neck, beautiful shoulders, and actually look at her face. She looks very serene, very calm, and even her hair, I can imagine how this woman's hair would have looked. Look how beautiful and long and thick her hair was. And she would have been quite old when she died, so she looked pretty good. Here's another image of the great Queen Tiye. We see her hair here very well. She's had a bit of damage on her chest. When tomb robbers broke into the tomb, they damaged the body of Queen Tiye along with the other Amarna mummies in the Valley of the Kings. This is a color image of Queen Tiye's mummy, and we can see that her hair has actually got a little bit of a red color to it. So she probably was brunette or even a redhead. You see her royal hand up, which shows that she was a queen. The very This is the tomb, a very special tomb, of Ramosa. And Ramosa was the vizier to Amenhotep III and Amenhotep IV. who later changed his name to Akhenaten. And what is very special about this tomb, there's very few color, everything is black and white. The art is very different because of the art and religion that Amenhotep IV brought in. And something else you notice, there are these enormous columns inside this tomb, which is very unique. And standing in here, you hear the echoes. It is very overpowering to be in here right now. And something that I want to show everyone. The Egyptians believed in, obviously, reincarnation, and I believe that I am inside this tomb. Here is a man, long hair, a beard, eyeliner, and a bit of a big nose. Quite similar to me, won't you say? So, yeah, it's almost like I'm looking at my Egyptian self here.
What is happening here is the vizier Ramesside is greeting and receiving tributes and gifts as well as taxes from the Egyptians, allies, and neighboring countries. The Egyptians invented taxes, and everyone who was connected to them was compelled to pay taxes to the priests as well as to the pharaoh. Taxes were taken in various forms, however the most common form was grain. Being the vizier, Ramesside was in charge of many duties, not only taxes.
Along here, we see Ramesside and his wife, and he's seen here getting prepared, giving the offerings for his preparation to enter the afterlife. And it is so beautiful to see. Everything is just stone, and the eyes and the eyebrows have been made black, very symbolic of the Egyptians wearing their makeup. As we know, the Egyptians invented makeup, and this is a clear sign of the eyeliner that was very special to them. As you move on, you see them sitting here, preparing to go to the funeral. Here's the funeral happening. This is the only color. This is the only wall that was made during the time of Habu, before Aten. And here's the color happening. The official mourners were throwing sand over their heads, and the eyeliner that's running from the woman crying. And they would do this for 70 days until the mummy was put into the tomb.
Ramesside's funeral would have been very extravagant, and like the pharaohs, he was also buried in a golden shrine, and in his tomb he was placed with all the objects that he would need in his afterlife: beds, clothes, various food items.
These columns were carved out of the stone the tomb was carved into. And a very special thing when you come over here, you will see where the religion suddenly changes from Amun to Aten, changed by Akhenaten. And here we see the very prominent image of the sun god Aten. And here is Nefertiti and Akhenaten inside this tomb, being bathed by the sun rays. I can only imagine what it sounded like, what they would have said during this burial. And something interesting, as Ramesside disappeared from history, And Ay, Pharaoh Ay, later on, took over, the father of Nefertiti and the vizier to Akhenaten and Tutankhamun. It's very moving to think about what this man had to go through, sacrificing his religion for Aten and Akhenaten. It is very rare that we see an image or a depiction of Akhenaten with his father Amenhotep III. You could even see Amenhotep IV as almost the outcast of the family. So this could be one of the reasons why he changed the religion from worshipping Amun to his one god, Aten. He moved the capital city from Thebes into the middle of the desert to Amarna. And at Amarna, you know, it's been destroyed since Akhenaten was there. But it's a very difficult time period because we're not quite sure of what happened. There's so many theories. One of the theories being that maybe even Nefertiti was co-regent with Akhenaten, or that Nefertiti outlived Akhenaten, but we cannot be sure. I'm of the opinion that Nefertiti actually died before Akhenaten of plague, but we can't be 100% sure unless we invent a time machine to take us all back there. Akhenaten stated on a stela outside the boundaries of Amarna that he would never leave his city, and he never did. He didn't even answer when a foreign country would send him a letter asking for help. This was very bad. It put Egypt into such a bad light. These blocks that we're seeing here were originally at Karnak Temple, and after Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, Horemheb, Ay, every successor after him took these blocks down, flipped them over, and reused these as rubble to fill in other buildings. And maybe a good thing, because it's preserved all of these rituals of Akhenaten worshipping Aten, and we see just exactly what this king was thinking for his religion. He changed the religion, which was quite strange. Anybody who was caught worshipping Amun or any other Egyptian god was either forced to convert or killed. In some cases, we actually see that Nefertiti was even stronger than Akhenaten, because we see Nefertiti smiting these so-called enemies who are actually Egyptians worshipping the wrong god. You kind of get an idea of the relationship between Akhenaten and Nefertiti. Nefertiti being this incredibly powerful woman, Akhenaten being a more weak man. You can tell this because of his statues. He looks very different. He's malformed. He's got what people speculate as epilepsy, which is why he was having these visions. So, you know, with Akhenaten, things are so all over the place, it's very difficult to pinpoint down what was going through this guy's head.
Thank you.
During Akhenaten's reign, he took on a co-regent known as Smenkhara. This was towards the end. And actually, Smenkhara is believed to be a man. Some people believe maybe Smenkhara was Nefertiti. However, after Smenkhara, there was a short reign by another pharaoh known as Nefernuaten, and many people are of the opinion that Nefertiti changed herself into a pharaoh and used the throne name as Nefernuaten. I'm not of this opinion, just because I've seen a lot of studies done by other Egyptologists who also believe Nefertiti died during Akhenaten's reign, hence why Smenkhara came in. So, if Nefertiti was so strong in believing in Aten, why would Nefertiti become pharaoh and then help Tutankhamun to change the religion back to Amun? It just doesn't add up. But I respect other people's opinions, but this is just my opinion. I believe Nefertiti died during Akhenaten's reign. But, you know, we will never know 100% for sure. In the tomb of KV 35 in Thebes, modern-day Luxor, where they found Queen Tiye, we have two other Amarna period mummies. One which is a young prince. We presume he might even be Saqqara. This lady over here, her face has been taken away basically by tomb robbers who realized who this woman was. They were not happy with the Amarna period family. This is why these mummies have all been damaged so much. They were moved into the valley, the tombs got broken into, and the tomb raiders were not pleased. Her face that has been bludgeoned in, her chest they've taken away her breasts, they've taken away her arms, which would have been bent to show that she is a queen. Many Egyptologists have theorized that this might even be Queen Nefertiti. She's even got here the two pierced ears, and we know that Nefertiti was shown always with two pierced ears. Even on her bust she had two pierced ears. But DNA tests show that this mummy was actually Tiye, the mother of King Tut. We know that Tiye was the mother of Tut. The most controversial tomb and excavation was for KV 55, done by Theodore Davies. They went into this tomb, and to get through the main door, the sealed door, they actually used dynamite, and this damaged a lot of the artifacts in the tomb. And inside this tomb they found this coffin. You can see the rubble, everything around it, and this coffin, which was so badly damaged because of the explosion to get into this tomb. Actually, we know that this coffin was for Akhenaten. His name was taken off, however underneath it says son of Aten, which is Akhenaten. But actually, the craziest thing is when you look at the face of the coffin, it's still there. In modern time now, the face is not there anymore. A possible theory is Theodore Davies took the face off. He broke the face off and sold it to help pay for his excavations in the Valley of In 1912, a German excavation crew were in Amarna. This is where they found one of the most famous images of Nefertiti. This is the first ever image taken of the bust of Queen Nefertiti. This is the first official image, the first official photo taken of the bust of Nefertiti. Hitler was a big fan of Nefertiti, and when in World War II Egypt asked for this bust to be returned to the Egyptian Museum, Hitler threatened Egypt by saying that he's going to blow up major monuments. That is how this woman has remained in Germany. Nefertiti is clearly very beautiful. However, I see her as maybe a little bit cold, not really interested in other people's ideas or opinions. She was very opinionated. That's the idea I get about her. And with the connection with Tut's mother Tiye, and her maybe being behind Kia's disappearance, there is something more mysterious behind this face. It is a known fact that Nefertiti gave birth to 6 daughters, and that's the truth, only daughters, not a son. It is the minor wife of Akhenaten, Tiye, who gave birth to the future pharaoh Tutankhamun, who was known then as Tutankhaten. Canopic jars here for Tut's mother, Tiye, the other wife of Akhenaten, the one that Nefertiti became jealous of, and she disappeared from history. We're not sure why. Maybe Nefertiti had something to do with it. Inside this sarcophagus, they found a lock of Tut's grandmother's hair for Queen Tiye. So she was a very powerful woman, so I'm sure he had a very strong bond with his grandmother. There's a lot of speculation about Queen Tiye. One of the theories that I like to believe is that maybe, possibly, Queen Tiye outlived her son Akhenaten just for a couple of years, and Queen Tiye, along with her brother Ay, were very instrumental in changing the religion back from Aten to Amun and shaping Tutankhamun into the pharaoh that he became for the 9 or 10 years that he actually ruled for. This would explain a lot about why Queen Tiye only visited Amarna once. But if this did happen, this means that Queen Tiye would have had to be somewhere between 90 and 100 years old when Tut became pharaoh, which seems very unlikely, but not entirely impossible. This is one of Howard Carter's notes. This is actually the inside of a small coffin given to Tut by his grandmother, Queen Tiye. But what I love the most, it mentions Queen Tiye's name many times here, but here it says, a gift for Tutankhamun from Queen Tiye, a gift of grace. I love that, because this tells me Queen Tiye may have possibly been alive in the early years of Tut's reign, because Tut, when Queen Tiye knew him, would have been referred to as Tutankhaten, not Tutankhamun. Tut had an incredible sense of style. He was very stylish for his time. His perfume was custom made with spicard plants from India and mixed with frankincense. He had a very unique scent. He also loved his clothing, and he had a mannequin of himself. His staff would come in the morning, dress the mannequin, and he would choose, okay, this outfit is okay, I don't like it with these pants, whatever. Very interesting how interested he was in appearance. This is Tut's throne, the main throne that he would use in his everyday life. And actually this throne was originally used by his father, Akhenaten. It's obvious because you can see there the Aten sun rays that are coming down. You can see Ankhesenamun, Tut's sister, affectionately holding him as her husband. Tut's name is written as Tutankhaten on the armrest, which is guarded by the vulture and the cobra. But all is not as it seems on this throne, as Tut and Ankhesenamun have replaced the original depictions which were of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. To the front of Ankhesenamun we can see the outline of what is surely Nefertiti's face. The god Horus was obviously trying to avenge his father's death, Osiris, by fighting with Set, and they had a battle at Edfu, which is why they built Edfu Temple. And this here is not actually showing Tut hunting on a boat. It is symbolic, because during this battle between Horus and Set, Set turned into a hippo. Horus took a harpoon and killed Set as a hippo. This is actually showing that Tut is overcoming the chaos in Egypt at that time. And here is Tutankhamun's burial chamber. It's very small. As we know, the tomb was actually swapped by Pharaoh Ay for Tut. And it's actually a very beautiful tomb. And here we have the stone sarcophagus with the golden sarcophagus on the inside. And on the walls here, you can see, here's the shrine with the Tut's mummy on the inside, and over there we see Tut in the form of Osiris in his white cloak. Also Pharaoh Ay, who is Nefertiti's father actually, performing the opening of the mouth ceremony, which allows the dead to revive their senses.
Let's go inside into the burial chamber. Here we have the stone sarcophagus with the 4 protective goddesses on either side. And here we have Tut being greeted by Anubis, who is leading him on his journey in the afterlife. And down here we have the 12 baboons, the 12 baboons of Thoth, showing the 12 hours of the night and of the day. Here we see Tutankhamun with the deities and Tut here with Osiris mummified. As we go down, we see Tut here with Ay, and they're performing the opening of the mouth ceremony. And it's just incredible to be seeing this so up close. And as you'll notice, there's a lot of like speckles on the walls, almost like mold, that has actually been proven that it's not growing, that it was formed when they closed the tomb because the paint was not dry when they sealed this tomb. And when you're standing here, you hear the echoes. You can imagine what it would have been like at the funeral. But the thing you get a sense of is, why is it so small? But still you'll notice the similarities between Tut's tomb and Ay's tomb. The art is very similar, the colors are very similar. As Howard Carter, I can just imagine what it would have been like to be inside Tut's tomb and to see just gold everywhere. After Tut died, Pharaoh Ay, he knew that the only way he could become pharaoh is by marrying Akhenaten, Tut's wife, half-sister. Akhenaten did not want to marry this old man. He would have been 70-something at this stage. She even wrote to the land of Mitanni asking the king As we leave the Valley of the Kings with the naturally formed pyramid, we go to an area under high security where very few people have ever been or even heard of before.
Welcome to Valley of Baboons, where we do have a very beautiful tomb. We're going to see the tomb of Ay.
Am I right in saying that Ay, when Tut died, he wanted to take the throne so quickly, he rushed the mummification process.
He did.
And he put Tut into a tomb that was not complete.
And it was not for him at all.
Yes.
So we do believe the tomb for Tutankhamun, where it is right now at Valley of the Kings, should not be for him at all.
there's absolutely no tourists here. It's just us right now. It's very special.
No doubt. Come and visit Egypt.
I've been given permission to open the tomb of Ay myself with the key.
Imagine the method of like light
With just a little lamp.
That's right. This is the burial chamber, and this is the beautiful coffin, which is made like from one single piece of a stone, red granite.
The paintings are very similar to the paintings inside Tutankhamun's tomb.
That's right. Even the baboons, and even whatever like in Valley of the Kings at the tomb of Tutankhamun is repeated once more. Egypt is heaven and heaven is Egypt.
Exactly.
But you can notice that most of the cartouches, most of the names of Ay had been chiseled out.
Why?
And this is one of the main reasons, because lots of people discovered that his Ay, he was not the right person to be on this tomb, as well as to be ruling Egypt for that moment.
Yes.
So
It should have been Horemheb.
That's right.
This tomb is like 3,000 years old.
That's right. That's right.
To be standing here looking at these things is incredible. The Sphinx is a white alabaster Sphinx of Tutankhamun, but obviously you can see his face has been very badly damaged, obviously from the people who took over after him who were still angry at Akhenaten. And here at the top, the original images found from Tut's tomb that were taken by Howard Carter and Harry Burton. This was the innermost coffin, and underneath this, the death mask of Tutankhamun. And underneath this mask, they found the body of the pharaoh, the young pharaoh, the boy king, Tutankhamun. The mask was found with the beard was actually broken off. So this is how it would have looked without a beard. The beard being very symbolic of the pharaoh, if it had a curve on it, passing over to the afterlife, known as the Osiris beard. The side profile, you can see it's had a lot of damage from when Howard Carter pulled it off of the young king's body. He actually dislocated Tut's head when he took the mask off. A very unique thing is Tut is the only pharaoh shown here wearing a cobra and a vulture at the same time. Vultures were seen more as feminine, so we're not sure if maybe the headdress was gifted to Tut or recycled and the face was added on. It might just be the way that they manufactured the mask. But something that annoys me is people always say Tut's ears are pierced. Now, countless other pharaohs have also got pierced ears. Even later on in their adult life, they are shown with pierced ears. Seti, Ramses, Akhenaten are all shown as adults with pierced ears. So that theory we can just dismiss instantly. The beard was reattached many years later, and this necklace is actually underneath the mask on display at the moment. Up until the 1940s, Tut's mask was displayed in the Cairo Museum, as we see here, with the beard not attached. It's only recently that the beard has been attached in the late 40s. Recently, the beard has been broken off, stuck on. We all know this story. It was stuck on with epoxy super glue. But you know what? Even without a beard, this mask is so iconic. Death masks in ancient Egypt were incredibly important. Mostly because once you've been mummified, your face decays, and your spirit cannot recognize your body, so they would place a mask over the mummified body for the spirit, once it travels back to your body after the 70 days, for it to recognize who you are, to be revived in the afterlife. And also the gods needed to recognize who this body was, and by putting a mask preserving the face perfectly, this allowed people to be recognized in the afterlife. In 1922, when Howard Carter found the tomb of Tutankhamun, it was an international sensation. You can't actually describe how this just blew up. And Tut's death mask, became the most iconic image of Egypt. If you speak to anybody today about Egypt, immediately the first thing they'll picture in their mind, blue and gold stripes and the face of Tutankhamun. It's very incredible that every successor after Tut tried to take his memory away, yet he is the most famous after the pharaohs. It's incredible.
The great queen, Nefertari of the land of Egypt, speaks thus. To my sister, Pudehepa, the great queen of the Hittite land, I, your sister, also be well. May your country be well. I have learned that you, my sister, have written to me asking after my health. You have written to me because of the good friendship and brotherly relationship between our brother and the king of Egypt. The Egyptian sun god and the Hittite storm god will bring about peace, and he will make the brotherly relationship between the great kings last forever. I have sent you a gift in order to greet you, my sister. For your neck, a necklace of pure gold, composed of 12 bands and weighing 88 shekels, blue-coloured linen for one royal dress for the king, and a total of 12 linen garments.
Ramses I was of non-royal birth, being born in the Nile Delta region near the former Hyksos capital of Avaris on the border with Sinai and Israel. Ramses I's uncle married a priestess of Amun, and using this high rank of the priestess of Amun, Ramses became friends through this family connection with the current pharaoh Horemheb. Horemheb, liking Ramses I, promoted him to high priest of Amun, and later on even promoting Ramses I to vizier of Horemheb. Horemheb, having no children, then appointed Ramses I to become his royal successor. Ramses I had an incredibly short reign, for only 17 months. It's quite interesting when you look at his story. His body was found in the 1800s and was taken to Canada. It is only recently that the Boston Museum bought the mummy of Ramses I from Canada for $2 million. The Boston Museum returned the body of Ramses I to Egypt, where it is currently being housed in the Luxor Museum. The Valley of the Kings contains one of the deepest tombs for the son of Ramses I.
You can feel these ancient spirits watching you as you go deeper underground into this vast burial chamber. This is the burial chamber of the tomb of Seti I, the father of Ramses II. It's one of the deepest tombs in the valley. It's a closed tomb to the public. And to be in here, the size, I can't even explain. I'm talking in a whisper because it's just so magical and the colors are so bright. We have the night sky above. Look at the ceiling with the night sky, and we have Isis with her sister Nephthys on either side. Seti ruled for about 12 years, but because of the ambitious task of building his tomb to include as many religious texts as possible, many of the rooms were left unfinished. This tomb was discovered in 1817 by Giovanni Belzoni. Seti was a prolific ruler who set out to reaffirm Egypt's status after the rule of Akhenaten. Taking back command over Egypt's borders, including Palestine, Canaan, Syria, the Hittites, and the Nubians, this tomb is very fitting. The pharaoh that we're looking at now is Seti I, the father of Ramses II. Seti's mummy is known as one of the best preserved mummies. If you look at his face, his skin, his eyes, his lips are just perfect. And he's here with his arms crossed in the kingly pose. And just look at how handsome Seti would have been
a very handsome pharaoh indeed.
To show his devotion to the gods, and above all Amun-Ra, Seti started his biggest building project with 134 columns and a height of 24 meters. The hypostyle hall at Karnak is monumental.
Karnak temple has the most amount of pillars. This is the hypostyle hall completed by Ramses II, started by his father Seti I, and I believe it takes something like 12 men to stand around one pillar to actually get the size. And these pillars are absolutely enormous, and it's almost like a forest of stone. And you can only imagine what this looked like. It would have been colored. Here you can still see some of the blue on the foot of Amun. As you come out of the hypostyle hall, on the side here is something I have never seen or heard about before. It's the battle of Seti I with Lebanon. And this battle was started about wood because Seti wanted these specific trees from Lebanon, and the Lebanese did not want to give it to Seti. So he went in, he fought against them. You can see Seti riding in on his horse and his chariot, killing the people, fighting, and then eventually at the top, the leader of Lebanon surrendering and giving the trees over to Seti. And this was built by Ramses II to tell the story of his father. He wanted people to remember what his father did. And this is interesting because if the wood was so precious to Ramses and to his father Seti, that might explain why Ramses' coffin was created out of wood. And if you come around the corner, and as he comes here, we see Seti crossing the Nile. And this is a great image because we see the Nile, we've got the reeds on either side, and in between we have fish and crocodiles. That's how you know it's the Nile. And as he comes back, the people of Egypt are offering bread and incense to Seti. He's got his captives, and here is Seti giving offerings back to Amun, saying, "Thank you, Amun, for giving me the strength to fight my battles." And Ramses really wanted to tell people how great his father was.
This is the coffin that they found Ramses II in. It's a wooden coffin, which is very unusual. It is his coffin, but it's not the original coffin that he was meant to be buried in. Obviously, a king would be buried in gold. However, I have a theory, maybe he liked wood, because you know, this wood coffin, you need to import it. They don't have these trees in Egypt. So that was very precious to them. Here we have the story written by the priests with Ramses Cartouche, where they're telling you how they moved his body to 3 different locations, and then eventually into the cache where they found all the other royal mummies. But for me, even though this is wood, it is still extremely beautiful. If Ramses did show his father, Seti, at war over trees with the Lebanese, how do we know that Ramses might have actually said, "Hey, let me make my coffin out of the same wood that my father fought over"? As we know, family was so important to Ramses II, and this wood that his father went to war over would have been of extreme family importance. Ramses II did nothing on a small scale. He built large and he loved large, having many wives and almost 100 children. However, the love of his life was to be his great royal wife, Queen Nefertari.
At Abu Simbel for Ramses II. This is my second time being here, and I cannot explain to you what it's like to look at this. It's just enormous, so you really get a sense of what this great man must have been like. Ramses II led his first battle at the age of 14 on behalf of his father, Seti I. He was crowned as pharaoh at the age of 19. He fought battles against the Nubians, the Libyans, Canaan, Assyria, the Hittites, and even the Sardinian pirates, which he recorded on a stela at his city in Tanis. Underneath Ramses' feet, here at his throne, you can see all of his enemies that he's conquered. Sometimes he didn't actually conquer them, it was just a city. They weren't captives, it was just a city that he took over. You can see each different face and the style of the hair that lets you know what area they're from. Like you can tell, you know, the Syrians with the beard and the hair, and all of the different faces. And on this side, these are the African enemies, or the African captives that he had. Ramses II was a great pharaoh, a great builder, and that is why he's called Ramses the Great. Inside Abu Simbel, you will see a lot of depictions, but the most important is the depiction of Battle of Kadesh, which is Ramses' biggest battle, and it's actually quite amazing when you see it, so I'll try and show you. Below the pure vulture ceiling, you are surrounded by 8 statues of Ramses on either side. And this is the Battle of Kadesh. Ramses on his chariot with his horse shooting his bow and arrow, showing the battle taking place. And this is known as the biggest battle in history. And it's quite powerful to be in here. You can see him holding the enemies, smiting them. Here he is riding home victorious. Over here is Ramses with Amun, the most powerful god in Egypt. Look at that, spectacular. Inside are many images of Ramses defeating his enemies. However, there are also many depictions of Ramses thanking the gods, thanking them for giving him the strength to defeat his enemies. Twice a year, the sun's rays illuminate the 4 statues of the gods in the innermost sanctuary of Amun, Ra, Ptah, and Ramses himself. It is incredible to stand here and think about how long this has been here, and that this has been made all by hand. The crazy thing is, it was moved in the 60s from its original location because it was going to be flooded by Lake Nasser. And It was also moved by hand. Every block was cut into 16,000 blocks by hand and moved up here. And Ramses was an incredible builder, so I'm pretty sure he would be proud to know that in the modern age, people still celebrate him, and they actually went to the effort to move his temple. I'm sure he would be very impressed in what they did. At the front of the temple, we see the 4 statues of Ramses at different ages of his life. But at the top, we see with his Anubis staff, Ra, or Ra Horakti, staring out at the sun as the sun god. On either side is the king giving an offering of Ma'at to maintain balance in his country. And by his knee is his great royal wife, Queen Nefertari, supporting him. And Ramses supported her as much as she supported him as an equal. Nefertari is standing here welcoming us to her temple. She's the wife of Ramses the Great, his favorite wife, and my favorite queen from Egypt. So let's go have a look at what it says above the door, Nefertari, for who the sun shines. Let's go see what the sun is shining on inside. Inside we see the queen wearing her vulture neckbit crown of Mut, and alongside each pillar we see the goddess of love and beauty, Hathor. This temple was dedicated to Nefertari in the form of the goddess Hathor, and inside we see Ramses giving many offerings to Hathor, as well as Nefertari holding the Ankh, the key of life, being greeted and cleansed by Hathor and Ma'at. The ever-loving wife, carved for an eternity into stone, shown supporting her husband during his battles. She was unlike most queens, making many important decisions for the country. The sad part of the story is that Nefertari never got to go inside her own temple, as she died around the age of 30, leaving Ramses' life thousands of years to come. Actually was built by But obviously in the 60s when they moved it, it was just under the water here. And they moved it 200 meters this way. It is absolutely, I can't explain what it feels like just to know that they were down there and now they're up here. His throne name, Woodside Era, means the ruler of justice of the sun god Ra is powerful. And Ramses surely was powerful. At 22, Ramses defeated the Nubians and built temples in Nubia. The Nubians actually became almost like allies, so Ramses' army grew even bigger and even stronger. Dedicated these temples to Amun-Ra in Sudan, Nubia, as it was known 3,000 years ago. This is the causeway here with sphinxes. Sphinxes in the form of Ramses II. Look at him with his double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. The inside court of the temple was lined with images of Ramses II, imposing images to let the Nubians know that he was in charge at this time. And inside the innermost sanctuary, we have Ramses II offering incense, holding the Ankh, the key of life, offering it to the gods.
But to appreciate the full extent of his reign, one needs to return to Thebes.
So under each one of these sphinxes is a little statue of Ramses II. So he definitely wanted to leave his mark here. What you're looking at here is a statue which was originally Ramses II with his wife Nefertari underneath, but later on Pharaoh Pedijam came along, he took out the name of Ramses, put his own name on the belt, but interestingly he kept the name of Nefertari, which I think because he liked her so much.
During his long and prosperous reign, many people immigrated to Egypt from the Mediterranean and the Middle East into a flourishing country. Karnak is the temple of the supreme god Amun.
So this is Pharaoh Ramses II with Amun. Ramses are on the right. Amun, as you can see, is here on the left with the two feathers on his head. And this temple is dedicated to Amun, the creator god.
One of the many Egyptian creation myths about Amun is that he created himself, and following that he created the entire universe and the earth with his wife Mut. And from the children of Amun came the plethora of Egyptian deities. Away from the public in the innermost sanctuary is where a select few would go to worship a golden statue of Amun.
This is the Ramesseum, the mortuary temple of Ramses II. And as we pass to go towards the temple, on the left here we have his palace where he would have lived with Nefertari. Am I correct?
Yes.
That it was Queen Nefertari?
Yeah.
She was writing letters
Yes.
to the Hittites
Yes.
at Kadesh and trying to make friends, and she is the one who told Ramses
To marry.
marry the princess and make peace. It was Nefertari.
Yes, Nefertari.
Very clever woman.
Very clever woman, and I think it is the first peace treaty between two
In the
nations
world.
in the world.
Because of Nefertari.
Yeah, yes, I know your favorite is Nefertari, and also the political marriage, to marry from women from another nation to make a peace treaty. It is some ingenious idea.
Yeah. Behind me now is the original entrance to the mortuary temple, and this is how you would have gone through, and this would have been for Ramses' afterlife. Not his present day, but to worship him after he died as a god. And you can clearly see his name, Ramses.
Yeah. Wisr, Ma'at, Ra, Sitib, and Ra. Sarah. Sarah. Ra, Sis.
The Persians came to Egypt and they obviously destroyed quite a lot.
Yes.
They were jealous of the Egyptians. Because of their great civilization, they were jealous.
They are jealous because the ancient Egyptians, they made a lot of achievements. And they had like heating inside or envy inside.
Yeah.
So when they occupied Egypt, they were very mad from the ancient Egyptian civilization.
Yes.
They heard about this statue which is located in the West Bank. They asked, where is the monuments here?
And they came to destroy it.
They couldn't. What they do, they made a huge fire for 2 weeks.
To make a crack, yeah.
To make a crack only, and after that they wrapped the statue with the huge ropes and hundreds of men.
And pulled his head down.
Yes.
It takes a lot more than a couple of men and some fire to destroy Ramses' monuments. A solid granite bust of Ramses II. And this head should have been on that statue over there, but it was destroyed by the Persians and found here. What's amazing is that you can still see the red and the yellow stripes here on the Nemes headdress. As you walk up, we have these 4 massive statues of Ramses II in the shape of Osiris, the god of the afterlife, the god of the underworld. I actually feel very sad for Ramses II. He lived until about the age of 96. And, you know, after Nefertari's death, he became very depressed. He took on more religious roles. He didn't want to do battle anymore. He felt very defeated and almost like a gap was missing after Nefertari died. You can see a depiction of his wife, Nefertari. She's holding the 2 instruments summoning the goddess Hathor, the goddess of love. There's a possible link between Nefertari and Pharaoh Ay. We presume they might have been family because of a walking stick found in Nefertari's tomb bearing the name of Ay.
You can notice all the pigeons that have made this their home, but a beautiful thing to look at is still the blue and the green on the ceilings of these enormous pylons, the columns going up. The colors are just still so bright. You can imagine what this would have looked like. It would have been colorful, blue and green and red everywhere. Ramses is running over the enemy. He's actually trampling over the enemies. And he's up there with his bow and his arrow and killing the people of Kadesh. He was extremely proud about the Battle of Kadesh against the Hittites, and Ramses recorded this battle on almost every temple wall that he built. His 13th son, Merenptah, became the next pharaoh. Ramses, during the later stages of his reign, he sent out his sons to do the battle because after Nefertari died, he just felt that he couldn't go on, and it almost must have been like a curse that he lived so long, as almost all of his children would die before him and he outlived them, as the average age was only around 30 to 40. What we're seeing here is Ramses I writing his name, handing it over to Ramses II, handing over his royal name. And over here we have Thoth and Sesat, and Thoth being the god of writing, Sesat his consort, and Sesat also being the goddess of astrology. In 1974, a French Egyptologist decided to do a Ramses II exhibition. She convinced the Egyptian Prime Minister President at the time to send the body of Ramses II to Paris. And it is actually here that this amazing woman decided to preserve the body of Ramses, as it was decaying quite a lot. Even his hand moved on its own. The great king moved his hand. 3,000 years after his death, his hand moved. And this amazing woman decided she was going to radiate Ramses' body to destroy all the bacteria in it, to preserve the great king. And it's very interesting, the results that we found from his DNA tests. He was a redhead and possibly, maybe not even possibly, for sure, not even of Egyptian descent. This is the original pathway that was here a long time ago. And this side, we have all of the kitchens and everything where they would prepare food and take care of the priests, and also Ramses and his wife and his other wives over there in the palace. And this is where they did all the cooking. It's absolutely incredible. You can see in here, you can see an oven, you can see where an ancient style fridge. This was like the servants' area where they would prepare things for the king for his everyday life, and also for the priests, because the priests were very important. So they would make the fire here, and on top they would cook their food, their bread, everything on this slab. This is the real part of living in ancient times. My favorite pharaoh, Ramses II. This is his mummified body. We know that all the mummies were moved from the royal tombs into one royal cache. Ramses' mummy actually being moved 3 times to different tombs until it was placed in the royal cache tomb. The great king lived until his late 90s. Look at his red hair here, his arm, which we discussed how his arm shot up. People say that his statues don't resemble his face, but keep in mind, when you're like something 96 or something like that, you're not going to look how you looked when you were 20 when you had your statues made. I love this. This is an artist's impression of what Ramses II would have looked like when he was a young prince. He would have been very handsome indeed. We all age, we know this. Look at his nose. Your nose grows when you get older. This is common sense. He would have been very handsome, and indeed he does have the sharp jaw like his statues. This is Ramses here as an old man before his death. Teeth problems, the nose has gotten bigger, his skin is sagged, and this is Ramses as his mummy after his death. I stood in the Cairo Museum. I looked at all the mummies in the mummy room, and I got to the end where I saw the mummy of Ramses II. And I stood and examined this king's face for maybe 10 minutes or more. And I just stood there staring at what is known as Ramses the Great, and I cried. I cried for 10 minutes, and I just couldn't take my eyes off this king. You can't explain what it's like to see these mummies. You can laugh, you can cry, you feel scared. It depends on the person's spirit that's coming out. But Ramses, I felt sadness, and I couldn't stop myself from crying when I stood in front of this king.
Even Ramses the Great could not escape death.
Although in Nefertari was indeed ahead of her time. She was a fashionista. These are my pictures that I've taken of the tomb of Nefertari. And what I want to show you is how fashionable this woman was. She was so amazing. Apart from her linen dress, which was so fine you could see her body underneath, no other wife of Ramses II was allowed to do this. Only Nefertari. But here we see her wearing a snake earring and her black bracelets. Here, she's not wearing any earrings at all, and now she's wearing 2 silver bands, also gold bracelets, along with a different collar necklace. As we move to this image, she's changed her outfit again. Every time we see this woman, she's in a different outfit. Here, Nefertari with the goddess Isis, and Nefertari has got a different outfit on. It's a cape which has been tied into a bow in the front, as we can see here, and no earrings at all, no bracelets either. One of my favorite images of her here, with silver and black bracelets. Her collar necklace is so detailed with blues and reds and different patterns compared to the plain gold one we see there. And here Nefertari is wearing a silver earring, which was a gift from a queen of Greece. People all over the world knew of this woman and they sent her gifts to keep Nefertari happy. Here we see Nefertari again sporting her Greek earrings, but this time she's wearing a green necklace. Every time she's wearing something different. And what I want to show you, this dress that she's wearing is a top and a skirt, and the top is a crop top. She has her midriff and her belly button exposed. Everyone thinks, okay, maybe Shania Twain, Celine Dion, Britney Spears, one of these women started this crop top trend. Nefertari, 3,500 years ago, is wearing a crop top. Here we see Nefertari again with her bow tying her cape together, and here her gold bracelets and a double chain bracelet that she's wearing here with the Eye of Horus and the cobra. This bracelet she's wearing here is so detailed and so beautiful, and I've never seen another queen wearing as many different outfits. Just look at this. Every time we see Nefertari, she's wearing something different. She truly was really something quite special. Beautiful tomb here in Egypt. It is the tomb for Queen Nefertari, the queen of Ramses II. I am so overwhelmed being in here. I have been waiting so long to see this. The god of writing, the god with the ibis head, showing that she can read and write hieroglyphics. She was a very intelligent woman, a very beautiful woman. This is a closed tomb to the public, so I am so happy that I've been allowed access to come in here on my own, and I have a little offering for Queen Nefertari, so I think I'm going to give her a little flower. So beautiful. Nefertari truly was the most beautiful woman here in Egypt. For me, I am so overwhelmed to be in here. It's amazing. Something interesting you'll notice is that in her tomb, there's not one depiction of her husband, Ramses II. And I like to believe that she is shown on her own here because Ramses loved her so much that he wanted to pay tribute to his great wife by dedicating this tomb, this incredibly magnificent tomb, to Nefertari. These are the granaries that we're looking at right now, where they would store all of the grain inside. And at the end of the work week, the workers who were building the temples, also the priests and everyone, would come here, and they would come with their little piece of papyrus, and the granary keeper would come and tick off that they've received their money. They got paid in food.
Yes.
It's so cool in here.
Yeah, so cool. Yeah.
So this would have kept the grain fresh.
Yes.
Yeah. And there was also, I think, in the time of Ramses III, there was a strike that happened where the workers were not getting paid and they refused to work. And they came to these granaries and they looted them and took all the grain out because they wanted to get their money.
Yeah, that's right.
What you're noticing here is these are arches. Not a Roman arch, an Egyptian arch. About 2,000 years before the Romans invented the arch, the Egyptians were doing it. This is Medinet Habu, the temple for Ramses III. With no relation to Ramses II, he was merely given the name in honor of his great ancestor.
You want to see the Pharaoh office? Come in to see the Pharaoh.
Imagine the activity here. The servants with their fans, food, incense burning, looking at this incredibly beautiful temple being built. I can only imagine it was something to see. And he would sit here on his throne. He would sit here and tell people, build like this, go into that country. When we go to war, this is how you will do it. This is where he commanded his empire from, this spot right here. To the left of his throne is where the vizier and army general were stationed. Apart from being dedicated to religious roles, Medinet Habu was also a war monument, dedicated in part to Sekhmet, where Ramses III showed many of his battles and his campaigns into various countries. Look how deep this is carved. I can fit
The deepest in all Egypt.
It's so deep.
Yes.
So no other pharaoh could take that away.
And we have a hunting scene here, and it is a unique hunting scene.
Standing in a very, very unique pose, one leg up and really in action. Hunting was a great pastime for many of the kings, and this scene is showing great prosperity in Egypt at that time. This is the lookout tower, and as we know, Ramses III had a huge harem of women, and all the women would actually sit at the top there, and he would sit there as well with them, and that's where they would watch the people coming in and out, and basically have a good time in the tower. Ramses III, during one of his battles, they would cut the hands of the enemies to count them, but for the dead enemies, to recount, they cut off the enemy's penis, which you can see here, and
That is how they would count how many people they killed in the battle, by piling up every dead man's penis from the battle. But all was not well for this king, as two of his wives were rivaling about which of their sons would become the next pharaoh, and a plot was formed where the harem and one of the wives smuggled in a snake into the pharaoh's bed, which ultimately led to his death. The snake's venom took about 10 days to kill the third Ramses, and this gave him enough time to see justice taken out against these women, of which we still have the written accounts. Among the wonderfully preserved colors, we have the world's first recorded wrestling match. Medinet Habu, meaning the castle of the snake, was one of Egypt's best decorated temples and palaces, showing the extreme wealth of Ramses III. Blue, as we know, was one of the most expensive colors to make in the ancient times, having to be made from ground precious stones such as lapis lazuli. You'll notice all of the colors that are still so well preserved here at Medinet Habu, the blue and the green, it's so beautiful. Towards the back, we see a defaced statue of what would have been Ramses III and Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing. Close to the public, at the back of the temple, are some of the most exquisite chambers you will ever see.
Oh wow.
This is how the ancient Egyptians saw heaven.
Look at this doorway. We're going through into here, we see bones, Hapi, the god of the Nile. Look at the color on the pharaoh. And above, we have Horus and Thoth tying Egypt together. And here we have the 7 cows that the pharaoh would take into his afterlife with him. Look at this beautiful color and the detail on the god Hapi, the blue and the gold. Here we have the pharaoh making an offering to Thoth, Osiris again, and these texts, am I right? These texts are from the Book of the Dead.
The Book of the Dead was essentially your guideline on how to enter the afterlife, known as the Duat, and to be allowed by the god Osiris into the field of reeds, where you will live happily for the rest of eternity.
Here to this shrine, which was dedicated to Ramses III and the god Osiris, where you see this beautiful wall and the arched ceiling, and something that you notice is that on either side it's equal, it's reflected. What's happening there is happening here. It's mirrored perfectly, and that is to show the ancient Egyptians' belief in the afterlife. To show what you do in this life, it will be happening in the afterlife. The parallel between life and death.
for she is the most beautiful woman alive. Just by passing, she has stolen away my heart. She who fills the colonnaded halls with her perfume, the land of gold. Her perfect breast draped in the finest of white linens, slender-necked. Gold is nothing compared to her arms. Her fingers are like lotus petals. Her waist is narrow, round buttocks, skin as fair and soft as milk. Her hair is color of the darkest lavender. Beautiful face, my love for her is unique. No one can rival her. She is the most beautiful woman in the world, beloved of Mut, Nefertari, the beauty of the beauties.
Psusennes was the third pharaoh of the 21st dynasty. His father was Perigem, who ruled from Thebes in the south. Yet Psusennes ruled from the north in Lower Egypt, in Tanis, and Psusennes was actually responsible for relocating an entire city known as Pyramids, built by his great ancestor Ramses II, and saved it from being flooded by the Nile. And I am about to meet the king that has fascinated my imagination, a pharaoh that few people know about. Pharaoh Psusennes. His tomb was discovered in 1940 in the city of Tanis, almost 20 years after the discovery of Tutankhamun. This discovery was made by Pierre Montet and is one of the only tombs found completely intact. Unfortunately, this pharaoh's story was never told because of World War II. Psusennes died at the age of 80 and ruled Egypt as pharaoh and high priest for 47 years. He is more commonly known as the Silver Pharaoh, due to the silver sarcophagus of Horus and the silver sarcophagus in the form of himself. Psusennes was a direct descendant of Merenptah, the son of Ramses the Great and Queen Nefertari. This is the Luxor Museum. It is one of the lesser known museums here in Egypt, and I cannot wait to show everybody what is inside.
Imagine Amun-Ra as a man with two feathers. Yes. We have supposed to have feathers here.
Two long
feathers. Yes. Why feathers? Some people look at it as a mystery thing. No. The feather on the wings of the bird, they came high. Yes. So it is mean it is a high-rank person, VIP person, yes, because he is a god of the gods. And two feathers because everything in the life is two. Man and woman, black and white.
Amun and Mut, who also, the vulture,
yes,
and the two feathers.
Two feathers,
yes,
also is a god of everything. And also if you go to Iraq, if you go to Greece, you find Zeus there, it's a man.
Very similar.
It is the idea about the human, about the gods as a man.
Amun means the hidden one.
Yes, the invisible one. Invisible God. The invisible God who can walk between the people they can't rely on at all.
Almost every pharaoh depicted themselves with Amun, or depicted themselves as Amun with their wife as Mut.
This is the bust of Hathor, which was found inside the tomb of Tutankhamun, and it's wooden and it's been gold plated, and the eyes, you can see it's crystal and stone. It's very unique and very interesting to look into the eyes of Hathor. This is Tutankhamun. Yes. You can tell immediately that it's Tutankhamun because of the eyes, the shape of the nose, the fine jaw. You can see it immediately.
The Luxor Museum has many beautiful artifacts, not only from the reign of Tutankhamun. Many of the artifacts here are actually from the reign of Thutmosis III, and one which I find particularly interesting are the shields which are remaining from Thutmosis's escapades into Nubia.
The shields and the weapons of the Nubians. Yeah. You can tell because of the giraffe that they have the pattern on the shield.
Yes.
Yeah.
They use the giraffe skin as a kind, like camouflage.
Over here we have Amenhotep III with the crocodile god Sobek. And what's happening here is Sobek is holding the Ankh onto Amenhotep's chest, giving him life, showing him he supports him through life, for good health maybe. And this statue is carved from one solid piece of yellow alabaster. It's so smooth, it's so shiny, it's unlike anything I've ever seen.
Actually, at the base is the name of Ramses II, which was not uncommon for pharaohs to add their names to certain statues. Sobek was revered throughout all the dynasties in Egypt. Sobek, apart from being a ferocious deity, was also in charge of protection and the fertility of the Nile waters. Ramses I, Seti, and Ramses II were not the only pharaohs who changed names on statues. Horemheb, Pedagem, and many of the Ptolemies had all changed names on statues, which leads me to speculate about who is depicted in this alabaster statue. This statue of solid alabaster is believed to be a statue of Seti I, but if you look at the face, it looks a little bit not quite how we see Seti. But, you know, a lot of the times the pharaohs did chip out the names and change the names, like at Karnak. With Sedagem, he took out the name of Ramses II and put his on his own statue, leaving Nefertari's name on his leg. That is how you know who it was. But they believe that this is Seti I. Tutankhamun also wore a choker, so I don't believe that this is Seti, I believe this is Tutankhamun. There is no cartouche here on the belt, it's been wiped off. However, this, like many things in Egypt, will remain a mystery forever.
And Lovey, yes, this statue looks very Nubian, am I correct?
Yes, that's right. And I was doubt strongly in this statue how come belong to Ramses VI. And if we look to the inscription and cartouches,
we see the name.
It is look not in first condition. It means someone
smoothed it out.
Yes, moved it
and
out.
If you look at the pharaoh's belt,
yes, it's
there's no
also.
name.
Thank you for this notice. And his wig. And his crown.
Nubian.
It is look Nubian
So,
features completely.
Pharaohs did take out names, replace them with their own. I love Aswan. Beautiful here though.
In the 26th dynasty, after several invasions by the Libyans, Assyrians, and Persians, such as King Shoshank, Egypt was split into separate ruling states yet again. A local ruler called Psamtik came onto the throne and ruled mainly in Upper Egypt near Aswan, where he built a nilometer to measure the floods near Aswan, and recorded his story at Elephantine Island. This period in time was very turbulent as there was no clear ruler, and Egypt was yet again ununified. Psamtik led small, but successful campaigns into Kush, Nubia, Syria, and Palestine. But the pharaohs of the 26th dynasty were under constant threat from Babylon and the Persians. One Persian, Cambyses, invaded Egypt and took it by force, killing Psamtik III in Memphis. It was not until the 31st dynasty in 332 BC that Egypt would become unified again, and not because of an Egyptian, because of a Greek. Alexander the Great wanted what the Persians had. 40,000 Macedonian Greeks stormed into Egypt, and Alexander took Egypt over from the Persians. He wanted to become a true Egyptian pharaoh by worshipping the god Amun once again. He restored many monuments, staying only about 6 months in Egypt. He even founded a new capital city, Alexandria.
This is Alexander the Great.
That's right. Actually, here is Alexander the Great. He just giving like two aromatherapy cards to a moon rock, and here he's like washing the phallic symbolized like Amenhotep, the god of fertility. Can you see that? And actually, you can easily read the name of Alexander on the card. Alexander. Can you see that? No doubt, there is a good amount of graffiti everywhere from the Greeks, that's fine, as well as a good amount of colors, hats and flying on the top. Can you see that?
After Alexander, Egypt was now ruled by a new Greek family who still followed the Egyptian religion and the Egyptian traditions, and this family was known as the Ptolemies.
We're now going to have a nighttime visit to the temple of Komombo for Sobek the crocodile and Horus the falcon. Let's go in. This is Horus, the falcon-headed god, and this is Sobek, the crocodile-headed god, the god of the water of the Nile, and also the god of protecting and helping with fertility, also for helping to heal the skin, and Horus was helping to heal the eyes. This temple was actually designed almost as a hospital for healing those ailments.
Komombo is very unique, and the art style is very different from any other temple.
This is a Ptolemaic temple built by the Greeks.
As this is a temple dedicated to healing, they have a depiction of the god Imhotep, the inventor of medicine, where we see an amazing image showing all of his medical instruments that he invented. Here we see Horus, he's huge. Cleopatra, not Cleopatra VII that we know, Cleopatra VI, and her father Ptolemy VI, who built this temple.
It's very apparent that this is a Greek Ptolemaic temple just by the style of the art, but it is still so Egyptian and still so beautiful.
Just because the Greeks had adopted Egyptian customs and religion, Like many temples, the ceiling here has been covered up by black smoke during the Christian Coptic times. This pillared hall measures 36 meters high and was actually buried halfway under sand until the 1860s. On this wall we can see the Pharaoh Ptolemy laying down the first brick of the temple, with the goddess Seshat, the goddess of writing, helping him to lay out the temple. This is the boat with the priests and the pharaoh and Horus inside his shrine, guarded by Isis and Nephthys. Horus is inside and they are carrying him all the way to Dendera. The main reason for carrying Horus on the boat to Dendera was to join him with his consort Hathor. The inner sanctuary is the oldest part of the temple, and inside here is where they housed the golden statue of Horus, as well as the boat which would have carried him and concealed him during his travels.
Carry some perfumes as an offering to the god Horus of this temple. And each one of them, she's a woman. She's a city, and each one of them carry the name of the city. It means this woman are all the cities of Egypt and villages. They come to get offering to the gods.
Inside Edfu, there is a depiction here, as they believe this is the spot where this happened, a depiction of Horus and Set, where Horus defeated Set because Set killed his father Osiris. And in this depiction, Set transforms himself into a hippo, and Horus transforms himself into a man and destroys Set the hippo with his harpoon on his boat. And this is, they believe, the place where this happened, where Horus avenged his father's death. This is the battle. Here, very small, we see the hippo of Set, and he's defeating Set, defeating chaos in Egypt. The scale of Set is very important to show that Horus has now defeated him. Also, here we have a list of all the pharaohs of Egypt, and here it ends with Cleopatra VII. Obviously, we all know her story where she killed herself with the snake biting her breast. And at the top here are all the empty cartouches where they were expecting for more pharaohs to be coming. But obviously, after Cleopatra's defeat, they never completed it because she was the last pharaoh of Egypt. But I have a feeling one of those is waiting for my cartouche. During the battle, Set stabbed out Horus's eye, and him and his mother Isis set out to consult with Hathor to magically reanimate his eye, and his eye would become a very spiritual symbol for the ancient Egyptians.
Stories of Cleopatra are mainly on the outside walls of this temple. If you look over here, these are all of the crowns of what the pharaohs would wear. We have the red crown of Lower Egypt and the white crown of Upper Egypt, and the double crown.
Double crown.
As we go up, we have the Nubian crown, the Nemes headdress, the blue Kepesh crown.
Yeah.
We have the crown of Amun. It just goes on as the pharaoh becomes more divine, right?
Yes. Atun also.
Yes.
Some of Ptolemaic crowns.
At the back of the temple, we see Cleopatra's dedication to Caesar.
Cleopatra and Caesar and their son Caesarion.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't know that the way of birth, when you have a C-section, a Caesarian, it was actually invented by the Egyptians. When Cleopatra gave birth to her son, they had to cut her open because she was having complications.
Yes.
And it comes from Cleopatra.
Yes.
From Caesar and Cleopatra.
And until now they named this surgery Caesar.
Exactly.
Dendera Temple was a vast complex with many houses for priests and noblemen, and was dedicated to the worship of Hathor, the goddess of music, dance, beauty and love. This is very sad because Hathor is the goddess of beauty, and here they've taken away her beauty, they've taken away her face. This is the sacred lake that the priests would use to cleanse themselves before entering the temple. Purity for the ancient Egyptians meant that you were clean and presentable. You were not allowed to enter into a temple as a priest or even as the queen or the king if you were not clean and presentable for the gods. This lapis blue pillared hallway was one of the most decorated in all of history. Here we see the sky goddess Nut as she swallows the sun and it passes through her body until she gives birth to the sun on the temple of Hathor. Cleopatra's wealth and intelligence is reflected in the color and the details of the religious texts on her ceiling of her temple.
Above here we can see one of the first ever depictions of the zodiac. We have, starting with Leo, and you can see Scorpio, Sagittarius, Taurus, Pisces, Cancer, all listed in this ancient Egyptian temple.
The ancient Egyptians were the first people to use the stars and astrology, as well as many other practices, and they are not credited enough with the amount of things that they discovered and invented. Above, we see the story of the Eye of Horus that Hathor revived for Horus after Set stabbed it out. And you can see all the other gods coming to worship this all-seeing magical eye. Definitely bring a neck brace when you go to Dendera, as you cannot stop yourself from looking at the details on this ceiling. Used as a church after Cleopatra by the Christians, the inscriptions on the ceiling were too high and they used black smoke to cover them up. Even after being defaced, the Egyptian spirits are still here. A recurring scene that you will see at Dendera is the story of Isis and Osiris, and here in this chapel we see Isis and her sister Nephthys resurrecting Osiris after he was murdered by Set. Come with me as we go underneath Dendera Temple into these very narrow tunnels that the priests would have used for ritualistic purposes, but also during the Coptic times the priests came down here to hide from the Christians who were coming in to try and convert them, and if they did not convert, well, we know what their fate would have been. This is also where you see a very controversial image known as the Dendera light bulb.
Good. You did that.
I did it. Oh, shukran.
Shukran. So it's melted. But because if it is again natural granite, impossible to be such this way at all. Of course, there's some substance about that. So one of the mysteries, how it looked like melted. If from the infection of the feet, it will go down, not dried up like this one.
This looks melted.
Look, melted. One of the mysteries.
One set of stairs is spiraling, the other completely straight, symbolizing Horus's flight during an attack. You see these priests here, they're carrying what look like flags, but actually it's a symbol for a different city. In the uppermost part of Dendera, we see Geb, the god of the earth, with his wife, the goddess Nut of the sky. Here they are guarding this very special room which shows the resurrection of Osiris and the birth of his son, Horus.
While Osiris are sleeping, after Nephthys and Isis made the bread to make him turn back to the life, here, while he just standing and put his hand waking up.
And we move on here where we see Isis here.
She come like
she's making baby Horus.
Yes, and she came in image of the bird to open him, to have pregnancy process
with him. Who is this woman? I'm going to give you 10 seconds to guess. Okay, no, wait, that's too long. This is Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor in the movie Cleopatra. Now, I want to show you some depictions of Cleopatra. Elizabeth Taylor, surely she is amazingly beautiful. Look at the lips, the nose, everything. She's perfect. However, the Cleopatra that I know and that I've seen in her depictions is not Elizabeth Taylor. This is a coin, Cleopatra. She's not the beauty that we all know. She was an intelligent woman. I'll give her that. She was intelligent, she was strong, she fought for her country. When she saw she couldn't hold on to her country, things didn't work so well. But this is a coin showing Cleopatra, big nose, big chin. Yeah, a marble bust of Cleopatra. She surely does not look much like Elizabeth Taylor. Cleopatra is very celebrated in history, but the image from movies, as we know movies exaggerate things, the image of Cleopatra is nowhere near what the movie portrayed. They did this, Cecil B. DeMille did this with Ramses II with the Ten Commandments. It's just how things work these days, but you have to look at the facts. But Cleopatra, you know what? She didn't do too much of a bad job, and she tried to hold on to Egypt for as long as she could. She used her body for the good of the country, to secure Caesar. She secured Caesar by using her body. If she had Caesar as a husband, he couldn't make a war against his wife's country. Very clever. And she spoke something like 11 languages. So next time you think of Cleopatra, don't think about Elizabeth Taylor. Think about the real Cleopatra, the strong queen behind the actual story. Good thing to look at it's very powerful when you see the sun coming through, hitting the temples. Philae Temple is between the old dam wall and the new high dam wall, so the only way to get to this little island is by taking a boat. And it's a very secluded place, a very special place. Is dedicated to Hathor, which
and the Romans came in, it was a very turbulent time for the ancient Egyptians, who were still
The walls are darker and the lower part are lighter. That's why this temple was built on Philae temple. Centuries passed and collapsing of ancient Egyptian civilization and modern history come. In 1902, the British built the British Dam or Aswan Dam. So yes, before the High Dam. So during the Nile flood season, the water come to the half of the temple. After you can see the difference. Yes.
Washed off. Yeah.
Yes. After that, the High Dam built. So the location of the temple was between the Aswan Dam and the High Dam and submerged completely. Here's some trying of restoration, and you can see this restoration inside the divine birth room inside the temple.
So this is an area that people are not... Oh, look at the little bats.
Yes.
No problem. There's bats in there.
Thankfully, inside the Temple of Isis, they have not removed any of the Egyptian writings.
Cleopatra's cartouche. Cleopatra.
Adding their own symbols was sufficient.
And here is another cross carved into this hypo-style hall, making Philae Temple now a Christian temple. This is a little section of Philae that I'm going to show you now that not a lot of people visit or even know about, but is very important. But also here, as you can see, the cross that the Christians carved into this temple, making it theirs. But I'm going to show you how everything ended in Egypt. This is showing where Egypt ended. This is the last hieroglyphic written on a temple wall in ancient times. And what it says basically, it gives the name of the scribe and it tells us
that on the 24th of August, 394 AD, Egypt came to an end. The dwarf god Bes was the god of sex, as well as, ironically, protecting children. Inside a small chapel dedicated to him, we see the ancient Egyptians playing many of the world's first ever musical instruments. The Temple of Isis, Isis the goddess of beauty, and her temple here at Philae is absolutely beautiful. Even though they tried to destroy the Egyptian gods, you can still feel their presence here right now. The impact of ancient Egypt and this great civilization has left an impact on the world which is unlike any other.
From the view at Abu Haggag, the mosque here, inside the Luxor temple complex. And if you are allowed to come up here and have a view, you can see a really great perspective of the temple, and you can actually see a nice close-up of the statues of Ramses. You're actually looking at the great king in his eyes.
Ramses II, like every other pharaoh, has left a legacy for the world, and they will be standing here for thousands of years, once we are all gone. This is Luxor Temple like you would have never seen it before, from a totally different angle. Inside Abu Haggag Mosque, there are actually pillars and parts of Luxor Temple that they've used to construct the mosque many, many years ago. It's very special to be allowed to come in here. Come look at this. These are the cartouches for Ramses II. Inside this Muslim mosque, it's actually very special to see this. Wow. And we're standing here, the statue of Ramses and his temple inside. These are pillars and stone from an Egyptian temple, and inside is an Islamic tomb. And it's very special because it's the two civilizations, the two religions, living together as one in peace. And there we see Ramses and Nefertari. A different sight is seeing Luxor Temple at night, and at night actually you can really feel the grandeur of the scale that this place was built on, and you really should try and come here at night to feel the splendor and the magic of these columns at night, everything illuminated.